You know, when you scroll through the modern prepping world, everything seems so polished, so high-tech, and ready for any disaster. You see titanium tools, water filters that look like they're from a space mission, and sealed packets of food promising decades of freshness. But every time I look at all that, I can't help but wonder. What happens when the gear breaks, when the filter clogs, or when the supplies just run out? When the batteries die and the plastic cracks and you're left standing there with nothing but the land beneath your feet. That thought kept circling in my mind until I started digging into how people survived before all this technology even existed. And what I found was astonishing. Centuries before electricity or refrigeration, people had already solved most of the problems that preppers obsess over today. And they did it using one humble material that's been under our feet the whole time. Clay. It sounds almost too simple, right? But think about it. In medieval times, people faced every nightmare scenario modern survivalists fear. Contaminated water, spoiled food, freezing nights, raging fires, and months of harsh winter without any power grid to fall back on. And yet, they didn't just survive. They thrived. Their solutions weren't fragile or temporary. They were resilient, built from natural materials, and designed to last for years without a single replacement part. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Clay wasn't just a building material. It was the foundation of an entire survival philosophy. A technology that worked with nature, not against it. Let's start with the most basic human need: water. If there's one thing that will decide whether you make it through a crisis, it's access to clean drinking water. Today, we trust filters, chemicals, or UV devices, but every one of them has a shelf life. Back in the 1800s, when London was choking on cholera outbreaks and the Thames River was basically a sewer, a potter named Henry Doulton came up with something revolutionary. He used clay to create a filter that could stop bacteria purely through its physical structure. No chemicals, no electricity, just fired earth and precision. The brilliance of his design came from mixing clay with sawdust or rice husks, shaping it, and then firing it in a kiln. The organic material burned away, leaving behind millions of microscopic pores, each so small that water could pass through, but bacteria couldn't. It was simple, elegant, and nearly indestructible. And here's the best part: anyone can still make one. You find clay near a riverbank, purify it, mix in fine sawdust, shape it into a pot or cone, let it dry slowly, and then fire it. Once it cools, you pour in muddy water and wait. Drop by drop, pure, drinkable water comes through. You can even coat the inside with silver to push the filtration up to nearly perfect levels. In a world obsessed with high-end filters that cost hundreds and last only a few years, this one can be built for a fraction of the price and last 5 or more with basic care. It's not a gadget. It's a system that generations once relied on, now quietly forgotten. But what about keeping food from spoiling? Picture this. The power's gone out, your fridge is silent, and the temperature outside is rising fast. You've got maybe 2 days before everything inside starts to rot. In that situation, most of us are helpless. But centuries ago, people in places like Sudan had already mastered a solution that worked without a single watt of electricity. They called it the Zir pot. 2 clay pots, one nested inside the other, with a layer of wet sand packed between them. As water evaporates from the outer surface, it pulls heat away from the inner chamber, dropping the temperature inside by up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. No wires, no moving parts, just the physics of evaporation and the magic of porous clay. In the right environment, tomatoes that would last 2 days can stay fresh for 20. Carrots can last for weeks. Milk, cheese, even meat could stay safe long enough to stretch scarce resources into survival. Imagine building one yourself. 2 unglazed terracotta pots, a handful of sand, and a damp cloth to cover the top. You just keep the sand wet, place the pot somewhere airy and shaded, and that's it. It's cooling technology from thousands of years ago that still outperforms many modern off-grid products today. And yet, it costs almost nothing. It doesn't fail when the power grid does. It is the kind of system that reminds you how much knowledge we've lost chasing convenience, and then comes the question of heat. Because when the temperature drops and fuel becomes scarce, you quickly realize how inefficient our modern heating systems really are. Medieval builders had that figured out too. Across Europe and Asia, they designed heating systems that could warm entire homes using just a handful of wood. They built them from clay, stone, and brick, shaping them into what we now call rocket stoves and masonry heaters. The principle was simple but genius. Instead of letting all the heat vanish up a chimney, they captured it in thick clay benches or walls that absorbed the warmth and radiated it slowly through the night. You'd feed the fire for an hour, and your living space would stay warm for 12. It was quiet, steady, and clean, a system that turned scraps of wood into sustainable comfort. The Romans, the Koreans, even the Vikings had variations of this same idea. Because when you're fighting against the cold, efficiency isn't a luxury, it's survival. These systems weren't primitive at all. They were precise, carefully designed through centuries of observation. And when you see how each one fits into a bigger pattern: water purification, food preservation, heat retention, you start to realize something. The medieval world wasn't as fragile as we imagine. Their resilience came from understanding the land, not from stockpiling gadgets. They didn't need batteries or replacement parts because they built their systems on principles that don't expire. Clay was their quiet ally, shaping pots, stoves, homes, and even entire ways of living that could sustain a family through famine, flood, or winter. But survival wasn't just about warmth or water. Once you had food, you had to make it last for months, even seasons, without refrigeration. Imagine you've just hunted or harvested, and your supplies could feed a small village, but if you don't preserve it properly, it all goes to waste. Medieval families faced that same crisis every single year, especially before winter. Their solution was elegant and smoky, literally. The clay smokehouse. A simple clay structure built to channel cool smoke through hanging meat for days or weeks. The smoke cured it, dried it, and infused it with compounds that prevented bacterial growth. Too hot, and you'd cook the meat. Too cool, and you'd lose it to rot. But clay held that perfect middle ground, steady, cool, and breathable. The technique was genius. A small fire burned in a separate pit or clay chamber, connected by a low tunnel to the main smokehouse. The smoke traveled through the tunnel, cooling as it passed, before rising gently around the hanging meat inside. Clay walls held a stable temperature, and the result was shelf-stable, nutrient-dense food that could survive entire seasons without spoiling. It wasn't luxury. It was life insurance. Sailors carried it across oceans. Armies marched on it. Villages lived on it through brutal winters. And all it took was salt, wood, and clay. While today we spend hundreds on freezers or generators, they had a solution that needed neither electricity nor maintenance, just patience and understanding. But their survival wisdom went even deeper, right down to the microscopic level: gut health. Today, we talk about probiotics like they're a modern discovery. But centuries ago, people were already cultivating living foods using clay fermentation crocks. These weren't just jars. They were micro-ecosystems, sealed by water, designed to let gases out while keeping oxygen and contamination away. Cabbage, turnips, carrot sol were transformed through fermentation into nutrients. Probiotic food that could boost immunity and digestion when diets were otherwise poor. Clay was the perfect vessel for this. Its thick walls kept temperature stable, protected from light, and created an oxygen-free environment where beneficial bacteria could thrive. Every village cellar probably had one quietly bubbling away, preserving not just food, but health itself. And beyond food, clay protected homes too. In a world of wood and open fire, one spark could destroy everything. That's where clay plaster came in. Spread thick on walls and around hearths, it turned fragile wooden houses into fire-resistant shelters. When flames hit clay, it doesn't ignite, it hardens. It absorbs the heat instead of spreading it. Even now, a 2-inch layer of clay plaster can resist fire for hours long enough to save a home or a life. It's completely non-toxic, made from the same earth people walked on, and it lasts for decades. Compare that to chemical fire retardants that expire or release fumes, and suddenly, the old way doesn't seem so primitive anymore. It seems smarter. If this kind of forgotten knowledge fascinates you as much as it does me, drop a comment below. Tell me which of these ancient clay systems you think could still change the way we live today. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you want to keep exploring the lost technologies that shaped humanity's survival, make sure you subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals, because the next story might just change how you see the past and your future.